All right. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? First, can you hear me? Yep. Doing great. Well, it's a beautiful day. It's sunny today. Yeah, I'm doing good. Very good, thank you. All right. So I'm gonna start with question 6 of the problem set. So just to remind you about what we've done on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we finished the session with perfect price discrimination, which is also called first degree price discrimination. And the idea of first degree price discrimination was to charge each consumer his willingness to pay for the good. Okay, so by doing so, the monopolist was able to capture the entire consumer surplus and then to maximize its profit even further than when it charged a single price. Okay, so when we had perfect price discrimination, consumer surplus was 0. The monopolist profit was the whole area, including the whole consumer surplus, and we had no deadwill loss. Okay, so perfect price discrimination was kind of efficient in the end, because we didn't have any deadwill loss, and all the possible surplus, existing surplus, was captured. All right, so now we're gonna move to another type of price discrimination. So one of the main limits of perfect price discrimination is that it's very difficult to guess what is the willingness to pay of each consumer. Okay, so it's not very implementable. And that's why third degree price discrimination that I'm going to introduce here will be a little bit more practical. So what is third degree price discrimination? So I've put some notes here. So first, third degree price discrimination, it's also called a market segmentation or group price discrimination. Okay, PD stands for price discrimination. So the idea here is that the firm is going to divide its potential consumers into groups, and it's going to set different price for each group. Okay, so how can the firm divide the population between groups? Well, it will have to do so based on some observable or verifiable characteristic. So for instance, it's going to sort people based on age, or based on where they live, or based on when they are going to use the good. Okay, so think for instance of movie theaters. This is a typical example of third degree price discrimination. So when you go to the movie theater, usually you face a menu of prices depending on your age. So if you are a senior, you're going to pay a lower price than if you aren't a senior. Okay, so that's a typical example of group discrimination. But to be effective, third degree price discrimination need to prevent resell between groups. Okay, so for instance, let's say that senior pay less for movie tickets. Then if they are able to resell those tickets to people who are willing to pay more for them, they can make some profit out of it. And so the price discrimination scheme is not going to work. So one important thing of group discrimination is that the firm has somehow the ability to prevent resell between groups. And one way to do that is to ask for the proof when you go to the movie theater. And if you buy a senior ticket, then you will have to show your ID proving that you are actually the senior. So what happened here? Okay. All right. So that's for the basics about a third-degree price discrimination. So now, what about the pricing? So usually you can find about a pricing condition by using calculus, by maximizing the profit over the two markets, the different group of people, and then you will find the optimal quantity for one group and the optimal quantity for the second group, and you can derive the optimal price for each group. But because your book doesn't use much calculus, I'm gonna introduce the solution graphically, okay? So here so the graph that is drawn is a little bit different than usual, okay? So on the horizontal axis, oh no, that's the vertical one, you have the price. And then I'm going to draw my two markets. So the market for senior, you're gonna read it in this direction. Okay, so this is the direction of increasing quantity. And for the market for adults, increasing quantity will go in that direction. Okay. So we are going to assume that our two population of adults and senior are different. Okay, if they are not different, there's no incentive to engage in price discrimination. Okay, so we are going to assume that senior are less willing to pay for a movie ticket than adults. Okay, so I'm gonna draw a demand curve and a marginal revenue curve that is going to reflect that. So the senior are less willing to pay okay, so that's gonna be to go to the movies. So that's my demand curve and that the marginal revenue curve. Okay, so they are less willing to pay to go to the movies and they are more sensitive to prices, to the price of tickets. Okay, that's why I've drawn a relatively flat demand curve. Okay, so now let's look at the group with adults. So we are going to assume that this group is willing to pay more to go to the movies and that it is relatively less sensitive to change in price. Okay, let me just do that. Okay, so that's the demand curve and that's the marginal revenue curve. Okay, so I've drawn a demand curve that is steeper to reflect that they are more inelastic. Their demand is more inelastic to change in price. Okay, so now the question is, as a monopolist facing these two markets, how do I determine the optimal quantity of tickets that I'm going to sell to seniors, and how I'm going to determine the optimal quantity of tickets that I'm going to sell to adults? Okay, so of course, it's going to depend on my costs. So here, for simplicity, I'm going to assume that that the monopolist faces a constant marginal cost. Okay, so I'm going to draw the marginal cost line like this. All right. So how do I determine optimal price and quantity here? Well, the rule will be that the marginal revenue in the market for adults must be equal to marginal costs. And the marginal revenue for the group of senior is going to be equal to marginal cost. So here, really, I use the same rule that is used by a regular monopolist, by a single price monopolist. It's just that I'm applying them to the different markets. Okay, so let's look at the result here. So marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So the quantity to senior is QS, and the price charged to senior is going to be PS. Okay. Now I'll do the same with the adult. So marginal cost equals marginal revenue. It occurs here. So that's the optimum quantity for adults. And what about the price? I go up to my demand curve and I get the price charged to adults. Okay. So first, you can notice that because we have these two conditions, marginal revenue equals marginal cost in both groups, we can also state that the marginal revenue the monopoly get from selling to the adult group should be equal to the marginal revenue of the senior group. Okay. Why do we have this equality here? Imagine that, let's say, the marginal revenue for the group of adult is higher than the marginal revenue for the group of senior. Well, in that case, the monopolist would be better off selling less to adult, selling more to adult, because the marginal revenue of selling an additional unit to adult is higher than the marginal revenue you would get by selling to senior. So it would prefer to transfer one unit, one ticket from the senior market to the adult market. Okay, so it must be the case then the marginal revenue must be equal in the two groups. All right. Just to finish on this, there's something quite apparent from the graph, which is the relationship between the price charge, the level of the price charge to each group, and the price elasticity of demand. So remember, we said that the group of senior has a higher, is more elastic to change in price, okay? This was reflected by a demand curve which is relatively flat. And as a consequence, the monopolist is going to sell movie tickets to senior at a lower price compared to adult, okay? On the opposite, the demand from adult is relatively steep, so relatively inelastic to change in price. And because of that, the monopolist uses market power and charge a price way above the marginal costs, okay? I believe that's pretty much it on third-degree price discrimination. Do you have question at this point? Nope. All right. So if no question, I'm gonna move. So let's answer this question 6. That's really a conceptual question. So third-degree price discrimination involves charging each consumer the same two-part tariff? No. Charging lower price the greater the quantity purchased? No, that quantity discount. Use of increasing block rate pricing? No. Charging different price to different group based upon differences in elasticity of demand. Okay, so that's our answer. That's just what I've explained. Okay, all right. So question 7. You produce stereo component for sale in 2 markets, foreign and domestic. Okay, so again, here you have 2 groups of customer, foreign and domestic, and they cannot trade with one another. You will charge the higher price in the market width. Okay, so we have seen that. We have seen that the monopolist is going to charge a higher price in the market when the price elasticity of demand is the closer to zero. So where the demand is relatively inelastic. Okay, so our answer here should be lower on price, more inelastic demand. So answer A. Okay. All right. So now let's move to an application. So the local zoo has hired you to assist them in setting admission prices. They recognize there are two distinct demand curves. One demand curve applies for 12 to 64-year-old, and the other one is for children and senior citizens. Okay, so here we are given the equation of the two demand curve. Okay, so when A is adult and CS children and senior, crowding is not a problem at the zoo, and so manager consider marginal cost to be zero. Okay, so we have zero marginal costs. So question 1 says, calculate the number of visits if the zoo doesn't price discriminate and charges a single price to visitor. What is total revenue? Okay, so here we just want to find the equilibrium of non-price discriminating monopolies. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, you're gonna set right. So here, so we have the two demand curve here. Okay. So if the monopolist charge a single price, he will behave as is he was facing a single demand curve. So we will need to aggregate these two demand curve before we apply the marginal cost equal marginal revenue rule. Okay, so let's first aggregate the two demand curve. So we have PA is 9.6 minus 0.08 QA. Okay, so I'm going to aggregate the quantities. So to aggregate the quantity, I will have to inverse this relationship and to put a Q on the left-hand side. So it gives me QA equals 120 minus 12.5 PA. Okay. Now I do the same for the children and seniors. So PSC is 4 minus 0.05 QSC. And it gives me the quantity demanded is 80 minus 20. Okay. So I want to get the total total quantity faced by the monopolist. So let's call it QT. And QT is going to be the sum of the quantity demanded by adults and the quantity demanded by children and seniors. Okay. And this gives 200 minus 32.5. Okay. So once I have this demand, things are going to get very simple. I just need to get the marginal revenue to set marginal revenue equals to marginal costs. But in that case, the marginal cost is 0. And then I will find the optimal price and optimal quantity for a non-price discriminating monopolist. Okay. So to get the marginal revenue, I will have to inverse this relationship again. Okay. So this is yes, sorry, I didn't do it on my notes apparently, so I'm gonna do that now. So 32p, 32.5p equal 200 minus qt, which gives p equals, so 200 divided by 32.5, that's 6.15 minus 1 over 32.5 q. Okay, so the marginal revenue curve is given by the same intercept. You keep the intercept and you double the slope. Minus 2 over 32.5. Okay, and this is going to be equal to 0. Okay, again, marginal cost is 0. Okay, so quantity, optimal quantity here is going to be 32.5 times 6.15 divided by 2. So is it? Okay. So quantity is 100. Okay, and the price you simply substitute Q star in this equation here. Rather this equation here. So the price is going to be 6.15 minus 100 over 32.5. So it's 6.15 minus 3, which is 3.15. Okay. Now we can calculate the profit. So the profit here, because the marginal cost is 0 when there are no fixed costs apparently, profit is the total revenue, and that's Q star, P star. Okay, so that's 100 times 3.15, which is this. Oh no, there's a right, 315. Okay. All right, so we have the value for a monopolist which doesn't price discriminate. Now, the second question is going to assume that the monopolist actually price discriminate. And again, what are the maximizing price and quantity in each market? Okay, so this time we're going to get 2 price and 2 equilibrium quantity. And we are also going to calculate the total revenue and compare it to what we find in question A. All right, so B. So we know that in each market, the monopolist set marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay, so for the market with adult, we have this, and for the other market, we have that. But we know that marginal cost is equal to 0. Okay. All right, so now let's get marginal revenue for the adult group. So it's 9.6 minus 9.6 minus 0.16 QA equals 0. Okay. And the marginal revenue for the other group is 4 minus 0.1 Q. Equals 0. And this gives QA equals 9.6 over 0.16, which is 60, and Q for the senior, which is 4 over 0.1, which is 40. Okay, so we found the optimal quantity in the two markets. Okay, so now let's get the optimal price by just substituting this value in each of the respective demand curve. So PA is 9.6 minus 0.08 times QA. Okay, so PA is 4.8. We do the same for the children and seniors. Price is 4 minus 0.05 times 40. And so the price is 2. Okay. So here, if you look at the original demand curve, you can see that the demand curve for the adults is steeper than the demand curve for the children and seniors. Okay, so here we would expect the price charged to adults to be higher than the price charged to seniors. And if you look at our price here, this is what we find. Okay, so adults here pay twice as much as children and seniors. Okay, so now let's calculate the total revenue and see whether this price discrimination is beneficial to the monopolists. Okay, so the profit here again is total revenue. So it's going to be QAPA, so the revenue from selling to adults, plus the revenue from selling to children and seniors. Okay, and this is 60 times 4.8 plus 40 times 2. And we find 368. Okay, so that's the profit of the monopolist when he price discriminates. Okay. So is it worth it to price discrimination, to discriminate in that case? Well, let's just compare the profit with price discrimination with the profit we got without price discrimination, which is here. So clearly when you discriminate, your profit is a little bit higher than when you don't. Okay. All right. So I believe we are done with this question. So yes, price discrimination is beneficial. Do you have a question on this? Just a second. All right. Okay. If you don't have any question on this, I move to another type of price discrimination. So this kind of problem is very classic. That's a problem you could get in exam. I mean, it's not very difficult. It requires some calculation. You must be able to do that. Okay. So let's move to another type of price discrimination. Okay. So the next type of price discrimination is what we call two-part pricing. So what is two-part pricing? So the idea is that you're gonna charge a tariff in two parts. Okay. So for instance, you're gonna charge what we called an admission fee that gives you the right to buy a product. So admission fee or a fee. And once you buy the admission fee, you have the right to buy as many goods as you want, okay? And you're gonna pay a price per unit, okay? So the typical example of two-part pricing is amusement park. So in amusement park, typically you pay a fee upfront to get the right to enter into the park, and then you can choose to have as many rides as you want, and you are charged for each of these rides. Okay, so here, if you look at question 9, an amusement park charges an entrance fee of 75 plus a 2.5 per ride. This is an example of, well, this is a typical example of a two-part tariff. Okay. So what is the rationale behind a two-part tariff? So I'm going to assume that for now we face only one consumer. Okay, so make the assumption of one consumer here. And I'm going to draw the demand of his consumer. So one consumer, we say it's representative. So all the population will consist of the same kind of consumer. And he has the following demand curve. Okay, so I call it little d to remember that this is the demand for one consumer only and not the market demand. And I'm gonna put little mr here for the same reason. Okay, I'm gonna draw the marginal costs as usual. And we're gonna see how does this two-part pricing work. So first, our benchmark. What is our benchmark? Our benchmark is a regular monopolist who's gonna charge price equals marginal cost. So he's gonna sell quantity, I'm gonna call it little qm, and charge a price little pm. Okay, that's our benchmark. Remember, when the monopolist faces this kind of graph, he may think that there are untapped opportunities to increase its profit. Okay, so in particular, the consumer surplus in that case, remember, is this triangle here, so the area below the demand and above the monopolist price. And because the monopolist doesn't sell as much as perfect competition, there's this triangle here that we call the day dwell loss, which is a net loss of surplus for everyone. So as usual, the question is, how can the monopolist appropriate these two areas here? Okay, so I'm gonna put name on this. So that's A, B, C. Okay, so the monopolist profit without a two-part tariff is B. So how to design this two-part tariff in order to get this A and C? Okay, so First, you can notice that to get this area C, the monopolist has no other choice than increasing the quantity that is going to sell. Okay, so how can the monopolist increase the quantity it's going to sell? Well, by charging a price equals to marginal cost. That's the only way that the consumer is going to consume that quantity. Okay, so first thing, set the price per unit will be equal to the marginal cost. Okay, so that's the second part of the tariff. All right. But then the question is how to get this area here. Okay, so when you set a price equals to marginal cost, you're making less profit than if you charge a price PM. Why? Because you charge price equals marginal cost, which gives you zero profit. So you will have to compensate for this loss of money here. So the idea will be to charge an admission fee that is going to capture the whole consumer surplus. Okay, so the monopolist is going to charge an admission fee. Let's call it F. And what is the maximum amount that people are willing to pay here? Well, if this guy consumes a quantity QC here, well, his surplus is simply this area here. Okay, we are back to perfect competition. So if the monopolist set an admission fee equals to A plus B plus C, then the consumer is going to consume QC here at a price equal to marginal cost. So the monopolist doesn't make any money from that. However, to get the right to consume this QC, we'll ask the consumer to pay a fee which is equal to the total surplus he gets when he consumes QC. Okay? So what is the monopolist profit then? So the monopolist profit is what? So it's, so let's call this PC. So the price per unit it's going to charge minus the marginal cost times the quantity QC. Okay, so that the part related to the price per unit. And in addition to that, the monopolists get the admission fee, which is A plus B plus C. Okay, what is this? Well, price equals marginal cost, so this is zero. So the monopolist profit is ultimately A plus B plus C. Okay, so by implementing a two-part tariff, the monopolist is able to capture the entire consumer surplus again. Remember, here we've made the assumption that we have only one consumer. So that's the profit the monopoly gets from one consumer. What about if there are n consumer? Well, in that case, it gets only n times the profit. Okay, that's straightforward. So n identical consumer. Okay. So that's the theory of two-part pricing. Do you have question on this? No. So let's move to question 10. So Bruce runs the only bar in town, and an individual consumer's demand. So individual consumers' demand is this. The marginal cost per drink is 2. The first question says, compute the profit maximizing monopoly price quantity profit from serving this single consumer, assuming that the bar charges a constant price per drink. Okay, and then calculate the quantity and the profit when you have 100 consumers that are identical. Okay, so the first question assumes that there is no two-part tariff. Okay, so the first question is going to be our benchmark. So monopolies charge a single price. Okay, so single price, we know how to solve that. The monopoly set MR equals MC. Okay. What is MR? So we have the demand of one consumer, which is 8 minus P. So we are going to inverse to get the inverse demand first. So P equals 8 minus Q. And once we have the inverse demand, we can get the marginal revenue. Okay, so marginal revenue, you keep the same intercept as the inverse demand and you double the slope. So you have 8 minus 2Q is equal to marginal cost, which is 2. Okay, so what is Q? What is the optimal quantity for a single consumer here? Well, this is 3. Okay, so one consumer here in the bar consumed 3 drinks and he pays a price of 8 minus 3, a price of 5 per drink. Okay. All right, so what is the profit the monopolists get from that particular consumer? Well, that's P star minus marginal cost times Q star, which is 5 minus 2 times 3. So that's 9. Okay. So that's the profit for any single individual. Then we are told that there are 100 consumers per night. So the total profit, I put that in the big pie, it's simply 100 times the individual profit. So that's going to be 900. Okay. So here we have our benchmark. So when the monopolies charge a single price, well, the price charge is 5 and the quantity sold is 3. So we have 100 customer, which means that the quantity sold is 300 and the price is still 5. All right. So now let's move to question B, in which we are going to design the two-part scheme we were talking about. So here's the question is, how would you set the admission fee and the price per drink to maximize profit? Okay, so what is the optimal two-part tariff here? So optimal two-part tariff. So remember, the solution is set price equals marginal cost to guarantee that people are going to consume as much as they can, and then set an admission fee which is equal to the consumer surplus. Okay, so let's do that. So set price equals marginal cost. That part is easy. What is a marginal cost? The marginal cost is 2. So set price equals marginal cost equals 2. Okay, so now how do we get the consumer surplus? So let's draw a graph to visualize what happened here. Okay, so here we have 8. Okay, so the marginal cost is equal to 2. And so when P equals marginal cost, the consumer consume this. Okay, so we need to find out what is the quantity consumed when price equals marginal cost. So the quantity consumed is given by MC equals the demand curve, okay, which is 2 equals 8 minus Q. And we have Q equals 6. Okay. All right. So Q equals 6 here. So we know that an individual is going to consume 6 drinks at a price of 2. Now the question is, what should be the entry fee for the bar? Okay, so the entry fee is going to be the consumer surplus conditional on consuming this quantity 6. Okay, so let's calculate the yellow area here. So the yellow area is 8 minus 2 times 6, and you divide by 2. Okay, so it's 3 times 6, so that's 18. Okay, so what is the admission fee, the optimal admission fee? Well, the optimal admission fee will be to set F equals 8. Okay. All right. So that's for a single consumer. Okay. So what is a profit? So for each individual, for any consumer, what is the profit? So the profit is, so we have this first part, price minus marginal cost times QF, and this is going to be 0, plus the optimal admission fee, which is F star. Okay, so each consumer brings in a profit of 18. Okay. So now we have 100 consumer. So what is the total profit? Well, you simply multiply the individual profit by 100. Okay, so 1800. So if we want to compare the profit we got without price discrimination, which was 900, and the profit we're able to reach with a two-part tariff, 1800, you can see that two-part tariff is a very efficient way to capture the consumer surplus. Okay. All right. So, do you have question on two-part tariffs? Nope. All right. Okay. Again, this type of problem is not very difficult, and you're pretty sure you will get one in exam. Okay, so be sure you really understand this. Okay, so then another kind of price discrimination, but I didn't put any problem on this, is quantity discount. Okay, so quantity discount just mean that as you sell larger amount of a given good, you charge a lower price. Okay, so when you go to Starbucks, basically if you choose the small size, you are charged one price. If you choose the larger size, you are charged another price. And usually if the larger size is twice as big as the smaller, the price is not twice as high. Okay, so that's the idea of quantity discount. I'm not going to ask you a question involving calculation on this, but I want you to read the paragraph in the book on quantity discount, because this is very important. Okay. All right. So the last concept I want to review today is natural monopolies. Okay. So all right. So what is so what are natural monopolies? So we usually define natural monopolies by the structure of their costs. And in particular, natural monopolists will have an average total cost that is going to be decreasing over a large range of output. Okay, and this has important implication. I'm going to show you why. So the main idea here is that if you face a firm that has an average total cost decreasing over a large range of quantity, then it's not efficient for the market to have more than one firm supplying the product. Okay. So to show you that, I'm gonna draw a graph. All right, so I'm gonna draw the decreasing part of the average total cost. And we are going to assume that the market demand is going to fall in that decreasing part of the average total cost. Okay, so the market demand is somewhere. Okay. All right. So what happened here? Well, with this simple graph, you can show that it is less costly for a single firm to produce the market quantity, capital Q here, than it is when we have two or more firms on the market. Okay. So let me just introduce some notation here. So here, the market quantity in equilibrium is Q. And if I have only one firm on the market, then producing that quantity Q on average cost ACQ. Okay. So if you want to get the total cost of producing Q in that market, when there is one firm only, I put N equals 1 here, then it is simply Q times AC of Q. Okay, so this is by definition total cost. Right? If we want to represent this value on the graph, well, it's this area here. So the yellow area here is the value of the total cost of producing quantity Q in that market. Okay. Now let's assume that instead we have two firms on that market and that these two firms have the same costs. So optimally, they're going to split the production Q between themselves. So each individual firm is going to produce a quantity, a market quantity Q2. Okay, so firm A is going to produce Q over 2, firm B is going to produce Q over 2. Okay, so total market quantity will be Q. The question is, what is the total cost of producing market quantity Q when there are two firms on that market. So the total cost when there are two firms, well, let me write the average cost of the quantity here. Okay, so the total cost for the first firm in that market is this area here. Okay, so it is AC Q over 2 times Q over 2. Okay, so firm A is producing Q over 2 and incur a total cost, which is the blue area here. Okay, but now I have firm B producing also Q over 2. And what will be the total cost for that firm? Well, because they have the same cost, it will be also AC Q over 2 times Q over 2. Okay, so in other words, we have twice this area here. So this area is the total cost to firm 1, and we are going to add the same area here to visualize what are the total costs when you have two firms. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so all right. So when you have two firms on the market, the total costs of producing market quantity Q is the blue area plus the pink area. Okay, and it is apparent that this area is way larger than the yellow area. That is, when you produce the market quantity using two firms, you end up with a total cost which is way higher than when you use a single firm producing that same quantity. Okay. So when we have this kind of situation, we said that we have a natural monopoly. Okay. So because of the cost structure of this industry, because of this decreasing average total cost, and because demand is falling in the part of the average total cost where it is decreasing, then it is less costly to use only one firm to produce a market quantity. Okay. All right. So what is the problem with natural monopoly? I'm going to draw a last graph. So again, AC is decreasing. So first, I didn't mention this. I don't know if you know about it. So the question is, why do we have this decreasing average total cost over a large range of input here? Do someone has any idea about that? Okay, so I'm saying that we could have, typically a firm on that market would have, let's say, an average cost curve like this. Okay, so an average cost curve that would be decreasing only on a small range of output and then increasing again. And the demand would fall in the increasing part of the average total cost. Okay, that's the typical scenario. So the question is, why do we have this decreasing average total cost here? So it often happens when we have huge fixed costs. So the reason, we have huge fixed cost and close to zero marginal cost. Okay, so this combination of high fixed cost and close to zero marginal cost happen when you have network industries like electricity, gas, water, I mean, any industry that requires that you build a large network of, I don't know, anything pipe, for instance. But then once your network is built, the cost of serving one additional customer is close to zero, okay? So marginal cost is zero. And if you remember our equation, AC equals average fixed cost plus average variable cost, then if fixed costs are very high, as we increase the number of customers that are served, the average fixed cost decrease by a lot. On the other hand, when I increase the number of customers that are served, the average variable cost is not going to move much. Why? Because the marginal cost of serving an additional customer is close to zero. Okay, so this combination of always decreasing average fixed cost and close to zero average variable cost imply that the average total cost will fall over a large range of output. Okay. So what is the problem with this kind of industry? The problem is, if you remember, when we have a decreasing average total cost like this, it has implication on where the marginal cost is located. In particular, when the average total cost is decreasing, we know that the marginal cost is below the average total cost. Okay, so the marginal cost is below, and it's never going to reach the average total cost. And this is actually very problematic. Why? Imagine that you have a natural monopoly, let's say Con Edison, and you don't want this monopoly to charge people a very high price because electricity is necessary for everyone. So you don't want people to charge a very high price for electricity. So the government is going to intervene and say, well, with this kind of good, what we want is to maximize the social welfare. It's not to maximize the profit of Con Edison. We want to maximize the total surplus. Okay, so here, when you have a natural monopolist, the objectives is to maximize social welfare. And how do we maximize social welfare? Well, by setting price equals marginal cost. Okay, price equals marginal cost always gives you the highest possible surplus. So let's try to set price equals marginal cost here. I'm going to draw my demand curve. Okay, so price equals marginal cost means my equilibrium is here. What happened here? Well, if I set price equals marginal cost, then the firm is making losses. Why? Because average total cost is above the price. Okay? So if I set price equals marginal cost, and I am in this decreasing part of the average total cost curve, then it will be the case that the firm is incurring losses. Okay? I'm representing the losses by the green area here. So what is the consequence? Yes, exactly, that's an economic loss. The consequence of this, yeah, they could exit, but we don't want to. We want electricity, we want water. Okay? So how do we do? Well, one solution to this is to subsidize the monopolist. So the government may say, well, you charge price equals marginal cost, and I'm going to give you that amount in green. I will give it to you in form of subsidy. Okay? That's not the preferred solution, because we never know how the monopolist is going to use that money. Okay, so that's one possible solution, subsidy. The second type of solution is to set price equals average cost. Okay, so what happens if you set price equals to average cost? Sorry, it's not here. So if price equals to average cost, P equals ATC. Okay, what happened when we set price equals to average cost? What do we know? Well, yeah, so remember, the monopolist is going to stay in the market. Why? If you write down the profit, price minus average cost times Q, if you set price equals average cost, then the profit is going to be 0. Okay? But at least it's not going to be negative, like when we set price equals marginal cost. Okay? So here profit is equal to 0, and the firm has some incentive to stay in the market. Another solution, a last solution, I don't remember if it has a name. The last solution is to identify two groups of customers, like high value customers and low value customers. So for instance, high value customer may be businesses, and the idea, and low value customers may be houses, families. And the idea is to charge a higher price to these high value customers to kind of subsidy the fact that the monopolist is charging price equals marginal cost on low value customers. That's a third solution. So basically charge the monopolist price to high value customer, to high value, and charge price equals marginal cost to the low value customers. Okay. Okay, so this gives you an overview of what happens when we have a natural monopoly and what are the pricing issues. Pricing. Okay, so I have 7 minutes left. I'm gonna try to go over this. Do you have some room here? I'm gonna write here. Okay. So question 11. Because of the huge fixed cost of running pipes to everyone's home, natural gas is a natural monopoly. So we have the demand curve. We have a marginal cost of 20, and we have fixed cost of 1,000. So the first question is, compute the industry outcome, assuming that there is no regulation. Okay, so the government doesn't intervene here. What is the equilibrium of the monopolist? Okay, so no regulation, so the monopolist set price PM such that marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay, so marginal revenue is 100 minus 2Q, and marginal cost was 20. So equilibrium quantity is 40. When you substitute that in the demand, which is 100 minus Q, you find that monopolist price is 60. Okay. So let's calculate the profit. So the profit is PMQM minus variable cost minus fixed cost. So that's 40 times 60 minus variable cost. So here we have a constant marginal cost. So the variable cost is simply the quantity produced times the marginal cost. Okay, and minus the fixed cost. So this is 600. Okay. So what is the consumer surplus here? So we have the demand curve like this. Marginal cost is 20. Okay, so the consumer surplus is the pink area here. Oh, sorry, no. I must first put QM and PM. And so consumer surplus is this area here. Okay. So what is this area? It's 100 minus price, which is 60, times quantity, equilibrium quantity, which is 40, and you divide by 2. Okay, so consumer surplus is 800. So now what is social welfare? So welfare usually, you call it W, social welfare. It's consumer surplus plus the profit in equilibrium. So that's 800 plus 600. So welfare is 1400. Okay. All right. So this is our benchmark. I see your question. I'm going to answer as soon as I'm done with this. Okay, so question B. What regulatory price maximizes social welfare? Compute the industry outcome under this price. Would this policy be sustainable in the long run? Okay, so what did we say? If we want to maximize social welfare, so if the objective is to maximize social welfare, which again is the sum of consumer surplus and profit, well, the objective is to reach this triangle here in terms of surplus. Okay, how do we do that? That's always the same story. You set P equals marginal cost. P equals marginal cost. So what is the quantity when you set P equals marginal cost? So 100 minus Q equals 20. So you end up with Q equals 80. Okay. And so the price is marginal cost, so that's 20. Okay. So now let's calculate the consumer surplus, the monopolies profit, and the social welfare. So the consumer surplus. So the consumer surplus is going to be the blue area here. Okay. So consumer surplus is 100 minus 20 times 80 divided by 2. And that's 3200. Okay. Now what about the monopolist profit? So the monopolist's profit is PWQW minus, so the variable cost was QW times the marginal cost, and minus the fixed cost. Okay, so that's 80 times 20 minus 80 times 20. Okay, so this is going to be 0 because you're priced at the marginal cost minus the fixed cost. Okay, so in other words, if we maximize social welfare here, the firm incur losses. Okay. So what is the total surplus? So the welfare is the sum of the consumer surplus and the profit, which is 3,200 minus 1,000. And so we have this. Okay. All right, so the social welfare is positive, but the firm incur losses. So what is going to happen? So if the government doesn't intervene here, and if it just say, well, set price equals marginal cost because we want to maximize social welfare, then the firm is going to say, no, I'm going out of the market. It's not worth it for me. Okay, so this policy of setting price equals marginal cost is not sustainable in the long run. Okay, and as I mentioned before, one solution here would be to set price equals average cost. Okay, this solution would enable the profit profit would be equal to 0. The consumer surplus will be slightly lower than the consumer surplus when you set price equals marginal cost. But in the overall, with this scenario, the firm will stay in the market and it will break even. Okay? All right, so I'm almost in time. Okay, let me read the question now. All right. Okay, so Mariana, yeah, a review class or two reviews. So I said before that I'm willing to help out as much as you need. However, I don't want to prepare additional material for you to work on. So the best thing for you to do now would be to go over the problem set. And if there's some concepts or some problems that are difficult for you or some concept that you don't grasp, just tell me and I can set up a session and spend some time reviewing those concepts. Okay? It doesn't have to be a long session. It can be only 15 minutes or it can be longer if it's required. I'm really flexible. Okay, but it has to come from you. If you don't ask me, I'm not going to do anything. Okay? Do you have other question? Right. So will the short answer question will be similar to what we're doing, yeah, on problem set. So when you look at problem sets, you can see which problem set has multiple choice and which problem set has problems, okay? So you can guess what the short answer question will be. Typically with monopolists, it's very difficult to ask multiple choice questions that are not too easy, okay? So you're pretty sure you will get short answer on that problem set, okay? Do you have other question? Yes. Yes, so let's say All right, so what have we done today? Yeah, so you may have this kind of problem. Okay, so what will I do? Well, I will change the equation of the demand curve, I will change the marginal cost, and I will ask basically almost the same question. Okay, question number 8A. Yes, that's the one. How did you get QA and oh, right. So this is the equation of what we call the inverse demand. Okay, because I want to get the aggregate demand on that market and deal with only one demand equation, then I just inverse. So that's inverse demand, and from that I deduce the demand. Okay, so Q as a function of P. Is it clear? So so we had P equals 9.6 minus 0.08 QA. So 0.08 QA equals 9.6 minus PA. Okay, and QA equals 9.6 over 0.08 minus 1 over 0.08 PA. Okay. So let me check this. So this is so 9.6 divided by 0.08 is 120 minus, so 1 divided by 0.08 is 12.5. Okay, good. I'm happy you get it. Is there other question? Yes, so I will probably give you additional time to submit the short answer, although I expect you to be a little bit more organized than during our first exam. Okay, so typically you will have to submit a file, and now you know that you can submit only one file. Okay, so try to prepare on how to gather all your sheet of paper on a single file. Okay, it's like you can take a picture of 3 or 4 sheets of paper at the same time, or you can just merge them using PDF. I don't know, but I expect you to find a solution for that. I would like to avoid as much as possible that you send me an email. Okay. However, I have to add that I have received instruction about the final exam. So the final exam for you is only a makeup exam, okay? It's optional. So for the final exam, I believe it's from 3:30 to 5:30 the week after our second midterm, and I'm not allowed to give you additional time, okay? So for midterm 2, yes, that's fine. I'm going to give you additional time. I don't know how much yet. I haven't think about it yet. But for the final exam, if you take it, then don't expect to have additional time. Okay. All right. Yeah, so with exams on Blackboard, for the short answer question, you can upload one file at a time. So it means that you must be somewhat organized to put all the information I want to see on either a single sheet of paper, or I don't know, or take a picture from far to get, so I can see all your work. Yeah, so for the final, yeah, it's gonna be 2 hours, and I can give you extra time. It's not allowed. No, so once, okay, so about short answer responses, I will try to okay, so yes, I will try. Okay, let me do that. Yeah, so try to do it on a single sheet of paper. Okay, I'm gonna ask several short answer questions, and for each short answer question, you can upload a file. Okay, so that should be enough. I mean, unless there is a lot of calculus. Yeah, so all the topic for the second midterm are the chapter we covered after the first midterm. I believe it started with costs. Yes, only one file question. So how many multiple choice and how many short response? I will probably increase the number of short response. I don't know exactly how many. I'm gonna think about it next week, but expect to have more short answer question than multiple choice. I would say half-half. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so enjoy your weekend. It's very sunny. Try to get outside a little, not too much. And I'll see you on Wednesday. I'm gonna try to send you which chapter, which paragraph would be good to read before Wednesday, because the chapter on imperfect competition is very dense. I don't think we are going to cover everything, but I still need to look at it to decide which paragraph we are going to cover and which one we don't. Okay, so I'm gonna send you an email probably on Sunday about that. Okay, so I'll see you Wednesday. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.